Hello, and welcome to the FilmGamer Podcast, Season 4, Episode 5, and I'm calling it number 39 because I recently uploaded a review of my father and I seeing Twisters, but that was more of a special episode. And I've taken a bit of a hiatus because I haven't felt totally my best post-COVID, and as well, I'm just lazy. So, man, this is one of the busiest news weeks in the history of the world because President Trump almost got assassinated before he turned his head, which some people are saying is divine intervention. After he was shot by Thomas Matthew Crooks, who's a 20-year-old Virgo. I also put this in, even though that does not really matter. Now, what's so fascinating to me in our news cycle is that we are this is already old news, and this happened 8 days ago. Somebody, and people were right. They said, 10 days from now, nobody's going to remember this. And I still see on my TikTok timeline, For You page, point of views from that rally and stuff like that. One of them, hilariously, is Zapruder level. If you don't know what the Zapruder film, it is when John F. Kennedy was shot. Somebody was recording it on 8mm, and it became a really famous video because it's the best known footage of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which was, so imagine somebody recording that on an iPhone Pro. Then imagine at the very moment it zoomed in, perfect shot behind his ear, from behind in the back of the bleachers, perfectly zoomed in, and you think to yourself while watching it, oh my God, I cannot believe I haven't seen this footage before. This is elite. And then right as Donald Trump says his famous line, that's a little bit old, that chart, the guy zooms out, turns the camera inward on himself, and gives, a rock-on thumbs-up sign to include himself in the video as a selfie. And it reminds me of the guy that I worked with who was just a bit too vain. And it's like, yep, that's why you haven't seen this video, because he turns in on himself right as the shots ring out. There's about 6 shots back and forth between the sniper team, who already had Thomas Matthew Crooks lined up but didn't have permission to shoot him, and Thomas Matthew Crooks himself, who shoots out 3 shots, killing one guy, a firefighter who was huddling and protecting his family. He's a hero. And that happened 8 days ago, and we know all about this guy now. 20 years old, didn't shower, didn't cut his hair much, relentlessly teased at school, graduated high school. We know where he graduated high school, lived most of his life, all of his life, in Pennsylvania. Then he graduated community college, 2-year degree, boom. Then he worked and got a job at a local retirement home in the kitchen area. And the most fascinating thing, which to me is not very fascinating, honestly, is that he had no social media presence. People want to talk about, maybe the FBI was hiding it. Maybe the social media deleted it as soon as they saw, evidence and whatnot. I kind of don't think so. I'd like to think the idea that there are several people who have no social media profiles, really, and are just kind of out and about in the world. But that's neither here nor there. Of course, they interviewed his classmates and people who knew him at school, and, the typical stuff. And then the funny thing to me is that people were confused at a guy who was willing to take a shot at the president, at what his political views were, because people were ready to say, and Jon Stewart said this, are they on my team? Oh, he's a registered Democrat. Oh, but he gave to Blue Lives Matter. Or really, he was a registered Republican, but donated $15 on Biden's inauguration day. The point is that the guy was kind of sick in the head, even though he wasn't, as we know, mentally ill. There are a lot of people who do not care about politics at all. A majority of them, really. So to act like this guy had any affiliation is ridiculous. And more ridiculous are the newscasters and everybody going, you know, what possible motive would this guy have for wanting to kill Donald Trump? And in my head, I'm like, pick one. And then, as the FBI has investigated, they took over the investigation, of course. They found that, he'd looked some stuff up before. He was looking up, Biden and when the Democrats were doing, when they were going to be in town next, when Trump was going to be in town. It just so happened Trump came to his area. And the Trump team had been warned before, do not do outdoor venues. They are very difficult to secure for reasons like this. And of course, Trump being cheap, they don't want to pay the location fees. We saw that with Rudy Giuliani at the Four Seasons Landscaping. They just do not like booking and paying booking fees and location fees for holding rallies there. So they do it outside because it's cheaper. Of course, that ends up being a logistical nightmare, and you see it here, where basically local law enforcement had their part to protect, and Secret Service had their part to protect, and this guy was warning, he was on watch list, he was seen, he was walking with a rangefinder, even up to like 3 minutes before he was on the roof and spotted, and had his sights dialed in, but because of the radio cluster bomb of stuff going on, they couldn't get together, and then there was a tree in the way of where the lineup of the shot was. And the most funny thing to me was people debating on, was he a good shot or not, and people were like, well, he's a bad shot, he didn't even make the rifle team, blah blah blah. And and other people said, well, he's never shot a human before, like a live target before, so that's another thing. And then the second thing is, he knows they're lined up on him, he knows he's going to die. So that changes your perspective a bit, and this was 130 meters away and down the iron sights, which some people say, oh, it was very easy. They learned that in the first week of the Marines, but this was a regular citizen. And my big takeaway is just this. It's very simple. I think that if you have access to a gun, you are going to use it. Statistically, if you get a firearm, it is more likely than not that it will be used on you. You're more likely to kill yourself with a gun rather than not. And basically what happened is he used the gun, killed somebody, and died himself. Do I think there was a conspiracy? Well, it's still early in the investigation. But here is what I think, and it's something I've come to believe as I got older, because something happened to me as I got older and more realistic, you might say. And it's this. When I was younger, I believed in all the conspiracies. As a child, I had a lot of imagination. JFK assassination, moon landing. Ooh, I always believed the moon landing. Still do. Even though I know that it's, possible that it could have been faked, I don't believe that it was. Aliens, ghosts. I believed in all that. And then I heard about the Fermi Paradox. So the Fermi Paradox is the discrepancy between the lack of conclusive evidence and the apparent high likelihood of existence. It's used in the context of aliens because Enrico Fermi, when over the summer of 1950, speaking with fellow physicists such as Herbert York and Edward Teller, Teller is the one in Oppenheimer who says, until someone builds a bigger bomb, and was working on the H-bomb the entire time and does crap all of that entire movie. Gosh, I hate that character. I'm so glad that Emily Blunt doesn't shake his hand at the end, but I digress. His quote basically is, where is everyone? If there's all this evidence, why can't I see it, And it was in regards to UFO reports and the possibility of faster-than-light travel, and they moved on to other topics, and it was just the question of like, well, if all this is true, where's the evidence? Why can't I see it? And I kind of agree with that in regards to a lot of theories. And I believe, and I'll take from another movie for this, there's a movie, one of Netflix's now most viewed. It's not very good, but it's by Sam Esmail, and it's called Leave the World Behind. And it's just basically about technological blackout. Things go crazy. It's the apocalypse, and whatnot. And there's a question about terrorists and, like, are rich people in on it? Did the elites know? Did they, members of the upper bank? And Mahershala Ali's character, he's black, the black guy in the movie, and he is basically like, what's hard for people to understand is that they want to believe at the center of all of these conspiracies that there is somebody with their finger behind the wheel, their hand on the wheel, and they're steering the course of fate. But when stuff goes down, all they can really hope for is a heads up, because the truth is, there is no ghost in the machine. There is nobody behind the wheel. It is easier for people to believe that Thomas Matthew Crooks was a part of an Iranian plot because Iran had plotted to assassinate president. There were plans that were uncovered by the CIA or FBI or something this month or last. And people were like, oh, there it is. And the truth is that what if, because we don't know for sure, what if there is no conspiracy? It is so hard for people to believe that maybe this was an act of a guy who people keep referring to as a kid. And need I remind you, he's 20. He's a man. He can't be charged as a minor. This is a guy who had access to a weapon in 2024. And so he was able to find out exactly where the former president was going to be, scout ahead, walk around on his own, and then take his dad's gun. Then he got lucky because of jurisdictional cross BS and countless other factors. Climb up on a roof, aim and take a shot. And it's hard for people to believe, because, he had explosives in his car and stuff and was learning about other stuff, that this guy could have done it himself. And I say, given the same set of circumstances, what would prevent you or I or anyone from doing that exact same thing? Kind of nothing. Like, what one person can do. There's this quote, and I'm going to quote a video game this time. It's from Half-Life. It's what G-Man, the guy who kind of shows up after some kind of freaky science stuff happens. And it could be from Half-Life 1. It's been a while since I've played Half-Life 2 and Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Half-Life 2 Episode 2. Give me Half-Life 3, although, I don't know, I still haven't been able to play Half-Life Alyx, which is a VR game. Hoping it comes to Sony consoles or something. But there's a quote from Half-Life where G-Man, old guy in a suit, and he says, "The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world." People realized, instead of being a force for negative, a force for good, what they could do if they applied themselves. And I'm not saying this as a positive thing for Thomas Matthew Crooks. He should, burn in hell for killing that man, that firefighter. But people don't realize the power of one often enough, what a person is capable of. Another quote, and I'm just pulling quotes out left and right here, is something that this guy said on a blog as I was flipping through TikTok For You page. And, he talked about men having kids. And he said, a guy will do nothing for as long as possible until he has to do something. like, raise a kid. And then when he realizes that he has to do something, then he will do anything. And good comparison, just to loop this back around to politics, is people said this about Donald Trump winning in 2016 before he won. This was back when the media was basically at the point where they were saying, of course Hillary Clinton is going to be the first female president. There's no way Donald Trump can win. Oh, please. I mean, yeah, all of America knows him and has known him for 8 years on The Apprentice, and he has good name recognition, and he's funny, and well liked by people, well liked by men. A major group that Hillary has problems with, and Hillary did have problems with working class voters in Michigan. That's why Bernie beat. But that doesn't matter. It's hers to lose, and she did lose it. She beat him in the popular vote, but that didn't matter. It's the Electoral College. We didn't have the Electoral College, which many people think is old-fashioned. I would say if we did the popular vote, then politicians would campaign in Miami, New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and then F the rest of you. Like, that's just basically, and then large interests would basically run the world, and that's how it would go. So that's why these United States are tricky. So yeah, I'm a rare proponent of like the Electoral College maybe could be a bit more balanced, but I get it why they don't do that instead of the population. Goes back to the 13 colonies and whatnot. But I won't give you that history lesson. But one person said about Trump, and I think it was Joe Scarborough of MSNBC, who's like a Republican and stuff, and then an independent, and then whatever is convenient at the time that makes good TV, was saying, the thing about Hillary is that she's running against a man who will do anything to get elected. And he's a man who will do anything, because what else does he have? Like, he is running for president now to save himself. He has 4 criminal trials against him, one of which already ruled against him. He's been found civilly liable for rape. Someone else said, well, the classified documents got dismissed because Judge Eileen Cannon, who is a judge, by the way, that Donald Trump promoted while he was president, who just so happens to be the judge in his classified documents case. This is where he was accused of selling classified documents to the highest bidder. And, basically treason. Light treason. Or heavy treason. I don't know the contents of the documents exactly. And, giving a bit of weight to it, I'll say, is that, as Hillary Clinton said, because Hillary Clinton was, accused of the same thing with her emails, Bernie Sanders said famously, no one gives a damn. Yeah, and then Joe Biden was also accused of, like, classified documents. When he gave them over immediately, was super cooperative, whereas Donald Trump was just famously uncooperative. When is he not? When it comes to classified documents. And somebody said that because there's no law against the judge being appointed by the person that they're against, like, there's no actual, I guess, conflict of interest on that. However, someone recently said, due to the prejudice with which that case of classified documents was dismissed, it is likely to be retried and brought up again somehow, because it's just ridiculously phony. And the other thing was that with the Supreme Court ruling that the president is above, which is just insane, conservatives promoted most of the justices, the majority, it's about a 6-3 split on the Supreme Court. And they basically said, yeah, well, if the president in an official capacity does something illegal, then he's acting in the best interest of the country, so therefore he cannot be tried. And the 3 other the level-headed thinking judges were like, yeah, I'm scared for democracy now, because imagine if Joe Biden said, I'm assassinating Donald Trump in the best interest of the country, which would be illegal, but in the best interest of the country because, he's gotten, 55 people, Canadians killed, when he assassinated Soleimani, who was the Iranian head of state. He was a military man, basically the equivalent of our Secretary of Defense, and he was told by, I'm not sure if it was General Mad Dog Mattis or whoever his advisors were at the time, look, this target is so high profile, you cannot do this because there will be an immediate and swift response that we cannot guarantee the safety of our men and women or allies anywhere if you do this. And Donald Trump said, yeah, I don't care, because Donald Trump is a sociopath, somebody who cannot be, reasoned or negotiated with when it comes to specifically like social norms. He just like ignores them. It's not even clear if he understands them. The amount of times and backstories I'm sure you've heard of like Donald Trump having to be told by his advisor, we can't actually do that. That's like illegal, or that's not allowed. There's like hundreds of them, and I'm not going to turn this into a Trump bashing thing because I hate when blogs get like overly political. One of the voices I listen to, David Pacman, is pretty good, but it's kind of like his influence is pretty strong now, and he's pushing it a bit, where it's kind of like, well, let me be the one to tell you of why Trump isn't fit. And it's kind of like, okay, well, now it feels like you're pushing for the Dems, which you should, but like, I haven't even got into what's going on with them. But anyways, Donald Trump is willing to do anything, and it is his ability to do anything without being held back by anything that has brought him to this place where has 4 criminal charges against them. Another one is trying to overturn the results of the Georgia state election. In the federal election, he wanted to overturn the state's votes and might have interfered. That's going to be another one that might start in November or early next year. So that's 3. He's going to be sentenced in September. He was supposed to be sentenced in July, and that got delayed because the Supreme Court bailed him out, because the one thing he learned was that if I just stack and pack the courts by appointing judges every single day of my presidency, then eventually I'm going to need their help and they will bail me out. If I look up how many judges did Trump appoint, the answer is 174 judges for the U.S. District Courts, 3 judges for the United States Court of International Trade, 12 circuit courts of appeal as judges were confirmed as well during Trump's first year in office, which was then a record, which has since been passed by Joe Biden. So it's, in terms of Article 1, it says he made 26 appointments, 10 to the United States Court of Federal Claims, 7 for the U.S. Tax Court, 6 for Court of Appeals for Veterans, 2 for Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, and 1 for the U.S. Court of Military Commission. He then designated 3 people as chief judges of Court of Federal Claims, and he got to appoint 2 major ones. One took Ruth Bader Ginsburg's slot, that was Amy Coney Barrett, and the other, right as his presidency was closing, and then the previous one was Brett Kavanaugh, famously, who was definitely not qualified to be Supreme Court justice. So, anyways, my point is that Donald Trump may be an idiot, a pretty hilarious one, but he's dangerous. And I forget my basic point because I was talking about Fermi Paradox and that, and people behind the wheel. But if I could try and sum it all up, I would just say that Trump is a madman, and people want to think about like what conspiracies surround him and stuff. The same way people want to make a connection between him and Matthew Crooks. And the fact is that there's not really a connection. Try and imagine next time you have a conspiracy about aliens or whatever. Think like, what if it's something else? What if there is no big overarching conspiracy? What if nobody is behind the wheel? What if it's just all craziness and unconnected? That is what I find, you know. What if it was just Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone and, similar to Donald Trump's assassination attempt, if people cared about Donald Trump or liked him a bit more, maybe they would have tried harder to stop and impress him. He did, after getting shot, raise his fists in the air and want to go back for his shoes and make a show of strength and stuff. And then there was that photo taken of him with the American flag, which was hilariously of our times too perfect. People want to say, well, that's a conspiracy. It's all propaganda. He ordered a hit on himself. And the fact is, no, because you must remember when this photo was taken, it was at a rally. So there was already a flag behind him. The guy who took the photo was Washington Post, Associated Press, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. So I think that Evan Vucci, which was the name of the guy that was the one where Trump's raising his fists in the air, has blood on him, and the American flag's in the background, and the Secret Service are telling him to dive. People are like, that's too perfect. And I'll tell you, the photo perfection is the world we live in now. All about image. So it makes complete sense that it'd be too perfect. So, you want to believe that there's a conspiracy because it lines up, it's like a movie. That's just the times that we're living in. And funny thing is, this happened 8 days ago and I'm already forgetting it. Why? Because, well, on Monday he was inaugurated as the official candidate for the Republican Party. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, because I'm sure, given enough time, prep, and the right question, I can answer it for you. It's one of the few things my university degree in communications is good for. Just about everything except getting a job. So, on Sunday, a day or two after Trump's assassination attempt, Jack Black is on stage at a Tenacious D concert with Kyle Gass, his band member, and it's Kyle Gass's birthday, and Jack Black asks Kyle for a birthday wish, and Kyle Gass tells his birthday wish, which you're never, by the way, supposed to say if you want it to come true. That's just like a general rule. I guess Kyle Gass didn't know, but he wishes that the next person to hit Donald Trump doesn't miss next time. Now, everybody gasps and laughs. It's a rock band, rock and roll, hardcore and whatnot. And it was funny to me because I remember this black guy saying on Twitter or social media once, it could have even been Tumblr, and he was like, I'm gonna vote for Trump because I ain't never seen a president assassinated before. So it's just funny that, Trump running his big mouth, like, of course, condone all aspects of violence and whatnot, but it was, like, in a way, one might say, bound to happen if you were to pick, like, any president in the last 40 years who, might disturb the peace or get their disturbed into pieces, it would be Donald Trump. Again, not condoning violence at all, one iota. But to me, Kyle Gass's joke off the cuff was in jest. But here's the thing. Kyle Gass is only but one member of Tenacious D, the rock band. And the other member is Jack Black, who in June, quite recently, endorsed Joe Biden. So he essentially, by default, in the realm of politics, becomes a Joe Biden surrogate, which means that any behavior directly or indirectly associated with Jack Black comes back as a reflection of Joe Biden. So, my guess is what happened is, oh my gosh, the media goes, salivating for, they want the Trump story to continue, the assassination story, because that's ratings gold, right? So what's the next step? Talk about Jack Black. And the way that they reported on this story of Kyle Gass saying, don't miss Trump next time, which is a very rock and roll anti-authoritarian thing to say. Like, nobody takes their politics seriously. When Jack Black talked about endorsing Joe Biden, which was, for him to get the youth vote and stuff, most people, including myself, were like, great, Jack Black. I don't really care about his political opinions, but the world we live in now, heavily polarized, so the media wants to feed this beast. So what they do when they report the story is they say not Kyle Gass, but they say Jack Black's bandmate. Every single story is like Jack Black, mentions Jack Black, Jack Black, Jack Black. Jack Black's bandmate, Jack Black's band implies that they want Trump dead. That's what the story becomes. And it, of course, so somebody probably sat them down and said, okay, here's what's going to happen. You make a half-assed apology on social media, Jack Black, because you're the important one. You're the one that people care about. He makes an announcement. I am shocked and appalled. Of course, he doesn't really care, I think, but neither do we. You make a half-assed apology. And then, as a result, he's like, the tour is canceled. Refunds and whatnot. When they retour, it will be big. And it's funny because there's a section of like, last week, Kyle quit the band in the very first Tenacious D movie. They have like a joking section of that where Kyle quits the band for like a week and then it immediately cuts them back together. So that's my thought, is like, you'll make the tickets back, when you start up again, and it'll be a big thing, and it'll probably be after the election. It's just so heated now. So they're like, and everybody saw this as, Jack Black saying, canceling the tour. I was appalled by what Kyle Gass said, as him stabbing his band members in the back, which would be true, and you could certainly say is true. But if Jack Black did the rock band thing full time. Now, Jack Black is a rocker, School of Rock. He's the teacher, Ned Schneebly, or Dewey Finn, as his actual name is. And he taught iCarly, Miranda Cosgrove, the girl who actually does cuss a little. Anyway, School of Rock, Rick Linklater film, good movie. Also produced by Scott Rudin and starring Joan Cusack and Mike White, who wrote The White Lotus and that movie. But I digress. It's so politically heated right now. Somebody comes to them and says, okay, here's the deal. You're going to cancel the tour. You're going to make a half-assed apology. Kyle Gass is going to make a half-assed apology, which today he deleted. You're going to keep it up for a week. You're going to delete it. He deleted it. By then, it's cold. The story is cold. It's not coming back. So people are like, oh, it's so terrible. But that's, again, not the craziest thing that happened. The Trump assassination attempt turning into a 48-hour story is just like so crazy. There is 24-hour stories, there's 48-hour stories, 72-hour stories, week-long stories, and month-long stories, and then year-long stories. The year-long story is the election, which is like never-ending. I remember somebody asked the day after Joe Biden got inaugurated into office, and I think it was the second time, it's like, okay, who are you going to endorse Joe Biden for 2016? He's like, I just got in yesterday. Like, come on. So Monday rolls around, and it's the first day of the Republican National Convention, where Donald Trump will be inaugurated onto the ticket, be their official designated choice. And it's all built up to Donald Trump's big speech, and many people make big speeches. Of course, no sane person is part of the Republican Party, so they always get D-list celebrities because nobody in Hollywood, people say, oh, it's politically polarized and blah, blah, blah. There are plenty of, like, sort of right-wing people who keep to themselves. It's a right-wing conservative value to kind of keep your politics to yourself, which is kind of funny how we're at right now. But anyways, they get Hulk Hogan is their, like, big celebrity to speak. And, Trumpomaniacs and, Trumpites or something like that rips his T-shirt, which you can't do all in one go. He needs to take down the second one, and it's a weak T-shirt. And it's like he reveals Trump Vance. J.D. Vance is
Donald Trump's running mate, because his previous running mate was Mike Pence, and Mike Pence, using the one bit of integrity that he had, this was actually beautifully explained by Pete Buttigieg on Bill Maher this week. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, who um, ran against Joe Biden, was beating him, and then was basically told, "You'll get a big fat cabinet position in my party if you win, and I have the support of the party, so just do it." And he's like, "Yeah, okay." I'm very curious what he'll do and what he'll end up in the administration with, because a lot of people are kind of like, let's see what happens. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself, but basically, on Monday, Trump chooses J.D. Vance as his running mate. Who the heck is J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance is a guy who had a movie made about him called Hillbilly Elegy. It was directed by Ron Howard and went straight to Netflix. Starred Amy Adams, Glenn Close. Glenn Close was nominated for Best Supporting Actor as like a extra thing after she had been nominated and almost won for The Wife. She lost to Olivia Colman for The Favorite, of course, but riding that high, she showed up the next year with Hillbilly Elegy, which was also nominated for several Razzies, and she was nominated for a Razzie for that, I believe, as well. But anyways, it's a memoir about a hillbilly who then grows up, goes to Harvard, and, he ends up serving in Iraq, and then he, becomes a lawyer, and goes to law school and whatnot. And Ron Howard directed the movie. It's not very good. It should be good. It's a bit far too formulaic. It's just Ron Howard kind of doing a work for hire gig and being like, okay, well, this should work. This should just be something that people watch. And the movie is like, I don't think it's great. The main guy in it is also the night agent. But anyway, it's a memoir that J.D. Vance wrote that got turned into a movie. And it was written by Vanessa Taylor, who also co-wrote Shape of Water, was Academy Award nominated for that. So it had sort of the right people along, just for it to exist in people's mind. And by the way, I was incorrect. He went to Ohio State, got his bachelor's of arts, and then got his Juris Doctorate at Yale. So he went to Yale. And it was Pete Buttigieg who went to Harvard. But anyways, 39 years old, youngest person ever to be like on a ticket for United States politics for president. So he's the current senator of Ohio. They always get somebody from a swing state. So he was chosen, and he basically compared Donald Trump to Hitler, and several years ago said terrible things about him. But now, to be his running mate, he, said, I changed my mind, or I was wrong, or whatever, just to get on the ticket. And Pete Buttigieg, who's basically the same age, Pete Buttigieg is, it's funny, every time I hear his name, I think of Donald Trump pronouncing it. He's like, Buttigieg, Buttigieg. And Pete is 4 years older, he's 42. But Pete went to, Harvard, and he got his Pembroke and college at Oxford was where his BA is. So he went to Oxford, then he went to Harvard, then was a Rhodes Scholar. So he's like Bill Clinton level, smart and slick, always well spoken. But anyway, Pete Buttigieg is on Bill Maher. He says, J.D. Vance reminds me of a guy who was that I got to know very well. I met guys like this when I was at Harvard, and basically they start out, people get themselves tangled in knots explaining like, well, J.D. Vance is like closet libertarian, so why would we go with Trump? And he's basically like, we're making this more complicated than it is. The fact is that he likes money, and Donald Trump likes money, and they've, as a Republican Party group, historically done well for guys who like to make money, for rich men. And that's all it is about. And J.D. Vance will say and do whatever it is, whatever it takes to bring him there. And he's like, I saw the same thing happen with the man who was my governor, and that was Mike Pence, where he started out as an evangelical, and then he aligned himself with somebody who basically cheated on his wife and had sex with a porn star, and it ended with his own supposed supporters calling for him to be hanged while he used the one shred of integrity he had left to not overturn the election results. And so Buttigieg says, well, I hope it works out better for J.D. Vance than it did for Mike Pence. But that's who Donald Trump picks as his running mate. Now, Donald Trump is the oldest person, surprisingly, ever to be nominated for president. Joe Biden, I believe, was 77, or he was 78 in so many days. Donald Trump is older by, several days, basically, for that. So Donald Trump getting confirmed later that week is the oldest person ever to be on a presidential ticket as either a Democrat or a Republican. And Donald Trump, I'm not sure if he's actually a baby boomer or the silent generation, because there's 4 years between him and Joe Biden. I know what you're thinking, in case you haven't read it already, but yeah. So Donald Trump, 1946. I'm trying to think when baby boomers start. I mean, it would make sense to be immediately after the war. Yeah, so it's the first year of the baby boomer. Joe Biden is the silent generation. But nonetheless, Donald Trump is 78 and Joe Biden being 82. They are both being, dare I say it, pushed out by their party from slightly younger, very slightly younger, and in many cases, like equal age and whatnot. There are two types of people with power. There are the kings and the kingmakers. And the kingmakers are ready to push Joe Biden out. And I think that they are also ready to push Donald Trump out. And what they did was they elected somebody who was young. And young people are hungry. And what's going to happen, I think, this is pure speculation on my part, that similar to what he did with Mike Pence, is that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are going to have a fight around October. And I predicted, I wouldn't give myself credit for this, but I predicted, because it was heavily favored in the media, that I would choose J.D. Vance as his running mate. But I predict that they will fight, and they will get in a fight, and this time Donald Trump isn't going to win like he did against Mike Pence. He's going to lose. And I predict that Donald Trump is going to lose the election anyway, although with who they're going with now, I just don't know. But anyways, I'll get to that. I've covered J.D. Vance enough. But basically, J.D. Vance, well-educated. He is a veteran from the Marine Corps. And senator from Ohio, incumbent, was just recently elected. Same with Kamala Harris, where they were elected, and Barack Obama did one turn, and then they get plucked by the major point of the party to go on to bigger things, and you just see if they're good at marching orders or if they can do stuff like that for themselves. But anyways, J.D. Vance served in Iraq 6 months. Anyways, J.D. Vance gets picked as Donald Trump's vice president, and then, a bunch of people give speeches, blah, 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 skipping to Thursday, and Donald Trump, who we're all waiting on, is like, oh, what's he gonna say? And Donald Trump is like a really funny guy to listen speak, because you're kind of like, oh, well, just his tonality and bouncing all over the place, talking about Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs, great movie, by the way, talking about all that stuff, and basically about 33% of his speech that we wait all week for. He speaks on Thursday. He was shot last Friday, around there, and he talks about it and explains that it's way too painful, and he's only going to mention it once, not going to happen. He's totally going to mention it again. And Chris Christie came on. Chris Christie is 61, and he said Donald Trump has not changed by this. And the Republican Party did such a good job during the convention of rallying around this, trying to be a force for unity, and oh, we're nice now, let's bring people together, blah blah blah. And Donald Trump gives the most flat speech of teleprompter. You can tell he doesn't believe the own words that he's saying, and then he gets to ad lib, and he gets really animated, and he just kind of goes on and he talks about his assassination, which people are interested, but then he like circles back and talks about other stuff, and it's just a very long speech. And for some people, and again, it could just be the media and stuff, people were like, oh, okay, there he is. There he's back, because he's just kind of like scattered and talking about one thing and then talking about another thing, and then he goes on and on and on and on and on, which he's famous for doing. But people were like, oh, like he's actually not a good unifier at all. Never has been. He has always been the first out the door, and changing his ideas. And what I find funny is that the Democratic Party wants to ignore the fact that Joe Biden won in 2020, and he won. I'm pretty sure all three levels of government returned one of them. He did very well. He did better than Obama did, and he's been able to pass more than Obama did, and he received 7 million more votes than Donald Trump did. But who cares? Because what happens next is I saw Twisters on Thursday. Yes. I'm going in chronological order. I wanted to see Twisters. I had mentioned that it is my most anticipated movie of the year because I like the teaser trailer. I like the original. It's a co-production between Warner Brothers Pictures and Universal Pictures, two major movie studios that never happens, or it doesn't happen that often. But I was interested in seeing the movie, and it got good reviews. I'm like, great. But there were a few people that I trusted who were like, this movie does not have the juice. And I watched it, and I said to my father, like, I don't want to wait till Cheap Tuesday this time. I've complained multiple times about going to the theater and sharing the theater with people who don't really want to see the movie. This time I want to go with people very first showing. And as it happens, as the years have gone on, preview showings have gotten earlier and earlier, In the beginning of the century, it was midnight showings, Lord of the Rings. Now it's 3:30 showings p.m. on Thursday. So I went to that showing and just picked, child tickets because they were the cheapest, child and senior, which my dad used to do. And we went and saw Twisters. And I was like, okay, good start. Man, the previews really lasted a long time. And the preview that they played for my next anticipated film, Trap, the M. Night Shyamalan movie about a guy at a theater who realizes the police have set up a trap for him and tries to get out of it at a concert. And he just goes around causes Hitman Agent 47 style chaos to trying to escape. Man, that seems exciting and fun. But they showed the first trailer, and the second trailer is better. So I hate it when they show old trailers at the movie theater because it's like, there's a new one out. Why aren't you doing that? It's because they have to balance the time. And it felt like it took forever for the movie to come out. But the movie comes out, a couple of previews, opening logos, that Family Guy joke where it goes on forever, of Universal Pictures presents, Warner Brothers Pictures presents, an Amblin Entertainment production, And the first scene of Twisters is good. I'm like, okay, good start. But there was a feeling of Force Awakens, deja vu, where it's like, okay, is this just going to be Twister again? And a lot of people, when Twisters was announced and the first trailer came out, were like, oh, they're remaking Twisters? And I'm saying to people, no, it's a sequel. And if you look at it, it's like, well, how is it a sequel? And the answer is that it takes one element, which is Dorothy, which was the, those balls that fly up into the Twister, the science balls or whatever. That's the thing that they take from the last one. But there's pretty much nothing new in this movie at all from the last movie. And again, I saw bits and pieces of that. That movie came out in 1996. The special effects, they do look a bit dated, but it was at the time where CGI was new, in the current state that it is in now. It was new, and it was welcome to the next thrill ride. You saw, dinosaurs come to life. Now look at this tornado devastation. And they used a good mix of practical stuff, and it was a big, huge hit. Steven Spielberg later said to Bill Paxton, I think it was. He didn't meet him until the premiere of the movie, and Steven Spielberg just said to him, "Thanks for making me a big pile of money," because Steven Spielberg's company, which he had set up and produced with, made that movie. And they saw what Jurassic World had done with like reigniting a Spielberg franchise, and they're like, okay, great, we'll do that with Twister. Now the question is, are they going to try and do it with E.T.? Are they going to try and do it with, Jaws again? Spielberg before said no, and now he might just be like, well. But anyways, Twisters does not have the juice for me. It is 2 hours, and to me, it should be basically like a monster movie thrill ride. I just wanted people to drop left and right. I wanted a high body count, and it does not deliver on that front. I'll minimize spoilers. It's not like a spoilery movie, but I will say this. Anthony Ramos, who I've never really liked all that much, he first popped up in A Star Is Born. He's Lady Gaga's friend who's like sort of barely in it, but hanging around. It's like, yeah, good for him. He's a good friend. And then he was in The Heights, which all of the critics like really hyped up, and I did not like at all. And then he's in couple Crown Royal commercials. Hey, got to get that paycheck. And then he's in Transformers 6, which starts off as an okay movie, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm kind of bored now because where's Michael Bay? Where are the super hot chicks? And then, the special effects aren't as good. The scale isn't as good. It ends up being the highest grossing movie in Peru, but it's like, yeah, he started in a hit, but anyway, so he's like the third lead in this movie, this guy, Anthony Ramos. And Glenn Powell, who was in, Set It Up, which was a Netflix rom-com, and then he was in supporting role in Top Gun Maverick, and he's like, I want to be a movie star like Tom Cruise, and he's like the first person to try and make a run at like being the next Tom Cruise, because apparently Tom Holland doesn't care, Miles Teller doesn't care, a bunch of people kind of don't care. And by the next Tom Cruise, I mean like the guy who wants to be like the main guy who like gets chicks in the movies and stars in big blockbuster movies and then ends up shaping those blockbuster movies into something great. He doesn't do the whole stunts thing, but anyway, it's well liked by women. It's considered a heartthrob. He's about 35. Anyways, so he's in Set It Up, a straight-to-video Netflix movie who a lot of people like because romance, female directed it, female wrote it, although the female who wrote it seems like she has a bone to pick with, like, her ex-boyfriend, which is an entire subgenre online of, like, you see these articles of, like, I dated this guy and he was a movie head and he was an asshole, so I hate There Will Be Blood now. You get a whole lot of those. Or, I had a bad date, here's why all men must suffer, and stuff like that. Some of it is good writing, but it's just like, it's not very pleasant to read as a guy. But anyways, that movie's a hit, and then Anyone But You, low expectations, low expectations. But the movie cost $25 million, opens to $6 million at Christmas. People are like, it's flopped. Then it legs all the way up to $90 million, and people are like, the rom-com's back. Holy crap! Who's this guy? He's a new star. Who's the girl? Sydney Sweeney. She's a star. And then I had already seen, because it was at TIFF last year, the movie Hitman, which was on Netflix in the US. It's by VVS Films in Canada. You can actually see it on Hoopla, which is a free streaming service if you have a library card. So you use your library card, from Kingston or where have you, and you can sign into Hoopla. Canopy is another one where you can use a library card. Canopy is more old films. Hoopla, though, it's like occasionally The Beekeeper shows up there. Like popular movies that would be at a library that they know a lot of people want to see, that people would rent, show up there usually the week of. So, look on Hoopla because it's a pretty decent streaming service because it's free. And again, I guess nobody goes to the library but me because I keep telling people, hey, there's a streaming service which has legitimate movies on there. You should probably watch it. And then people, I'll do it sometime. But anyways, Hitman, 6 out of 10 movie. Kind of boring, but, there's a really funny sequence in it where somebody uses, like, a smartphone as people do in real life, which movies never do, because movies want to act like we're still in 2003 or something, and there's not a lot of texting unless it's like a weird stylistic thing that they're doing or about teens or something. But anyways, he uses the Notes app on his phone to talk to the girl while he's under a wire so that they can, get out of trouble. And the speed at which he uses swipe text to like explain to her like what to say and not is just like a fascinating comedy piece that works really well in the theater, and watching it at home because they took them easy money for it to be on Netflix kind of falls flat. But the movie premiered on June 7th, was a reasonable hit. And then, this guy comes out with Twisters, and he's the heartthrob in that. Now, here's the problem. There is no romance in the movie. There's the guy, Anthony Ramos, who I mentioned, pining after the main girl, Daisy Edgar Jones. British Girl was on Normal People, a miniseries which people liked, based on a romantic book about depressed millennials who, I'm attractive, I'm rich, I have everything going for me, but I'm also sad, and I can't communicate because I just can't feel. Anyway, big loser energy. So that's starred two introverts, one of which was Paul Mescal, who's going to be in Gladiator, and the other was Daisy Edgar Jones. So she was in Where the Crawdads Sing, a terrible movie based on a really entertaining book that even I would recommend. I don't read very many books, but it was really well written. It was written in a way where I saw the movie trailer, I'm like, that movie looks good. Just the style, the vibe, the atmosphere, I'm going for it. And then I read the book, which was an incredibly best-selling book, like sold tens of millions of copies. I read the book, and I watch the movie, and I'm like, this movie, like, contains all the events in the book, but it sucks. Anyway, but the reviews are terrible, but she's in it, and it's a hit. And it legs out to about like 90 million. It costs, again, 25 million or 17 million or something. It opens to 17 million, costs 25 million. Big hit. She gets put in this movie as the lead. And because it's 2024, it's post-Frozen, post-Me Too world and whatnot, there's no romance in the movie. There's no romance anymore. Because after Frozen, it's like, well, women don't need romance. They just need personal and career fulfillment. At least so men think. The guy who wrote this movie, Mark L. Smith, wrote The Revenant, a movie that is famously, like, enjoyably, amazingly directed, has like 4 or 5 incredible sequences in it. But the plot, which is interesting, is good. The script sucks. It's like lull, a sequence of unconnected events. And that's exactly what Twisters is. It's like, here's a twister, here's another twister, here's 2 twisters at the same time, here's this, here's that, here's this, here's that. And it's just all, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and there's like zero progression. The script to Twisters sucks. Just like the script to The Revenant sucks. And the script to The Boys in the Boat, which Mark L. Smith also wrote, sucks. But he's the guy that Hollywood's like, well, I guess he can write movies, so hire him. He was hired to do Star Trek 4. It didn't get off the ground. But anyways, Mark L. Smith wrote it. The story credit goes to Joseph Kosinski, the director of Top Gun Maverick, who also did Tron Legacy and Oblivion, which was based on his comic. I rewatched Oblivion. I love the atmosphere. There was a solid, I was watching it with my sister, 20 minutes between that and the last part where I just completely, like, my sister's like, I'm getting too tired. How does this end? And I'm just like, I've seen it before. I skipped to the end, and it was like, skipped through 20 minutes, and I was just kind of like, you missed nothing. Like, nothing significant happened in that 20 minutes. And that's all of Twisters, where nothing significant happens, essentially the entire movie, aside from the beginning. And so that's the writership that you're dealing with right now. And basically what happens is you have this girl who's like a career woman, and you're like, she's the best. Well, why is she the best? Well, it's like Rey Skywalker, where they're just kind of good at everything, and the whole plot waits around for her to make a decision, and she needs to screw up because that's what has to happen. And it's annoying because it's like, okay, call to adventure, refusal of the call, decides to go ultimately. Oh, she runs into this guy. Oh, they have banter, and she decides to hate Glenn Powell for kind of no reason, because he's supposed to be presented as like a Logan Paul-esque YouTube hack, but he plays him like way too charming. Like, this character needed to be 10 or 20% more dickish. And I do say that, they could have hired Scott Eastwood for this role, because he's the perfect guy I think I'm going to hate. But then you sit and talk to him, and he's kind of like hilarious or nice enough to talk to. And Scott Eastwood has been in a couple of those films. And the thing is that he can't act that well. He's not a great actor, but he would already be cast for that role. Like, you just need a 6-pack of abs. And if you look at the contribution to what Glenn Powell does this movie, he's not in it a lot, disappointingly. You think he's the co-lead, he's going to be like number one, number two with the girl, and he's not. He's just like sort of number three, or he shares the number three position with, Anthony Ramos. So he just kind of stands there, listens to her, and then says to his scientific buddies, "She's right, you guys." And then that's what they do. And it has the same setup of like, there's one science team chasing after tornadoes, and then another fancier science team. And the people who are the fancy science team have PhDs, but they're in it for the money. And then there's the rough and tumble, YouTubers and stuff who actually care about people, but don't have any PhDs until it's revealed one of them does have a PhD and is actually a meteorologist. And it's like, oh my gosh, I thought they were a meathead. And it's just like, okay, that's like a thing that already exists about a character is supposed to like change something. Like that's like only in bad writing does like an existing trait about a character that already exists before the movie starts that's supposed to move the plot along. Like, I would say that famously, Luke, I am your father. People say that's a twist, and this is where people get messed up in screenwriting, is that, like, that by its own is not a significant factor, because that was also changed, like, last minute. Luke, being the son of Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, isn't of itself, like, a story move. It's the fact that he's fighting them, and he gets his arm cut off, and he's doomed. And he tells him at he's doomed that, like, the one shred of information is that, like, he's good. He's ultimately good. Luke Skywalker is good. He was raised by Obi-Wan to become a Jedi and take down the evil guy. Good will triumph over evil until the Darth Vader line reveals that evil is a part of him. It is connected to him somehow. And that is how he is doomed. Because it's not the significance on its own that Luke, I am your father. It is what Luke realizes about himself that he is doomed. And that is then why he decides he'd rather fall and to his death than, join his father as his last act of rebellion. But that's like where it ends, on a hope of like, oh my gosh, this new information. That new information by itself isn't significant. It's how it changes the game and how a character learns about themselves that pushes the story forward. So somebody has to learn something or do something. But just saying something by itself, like famously in Star Trek Into Darkness, where Benedict Cumberbatch says, "I am Khan," that means at that point in the story absolutely nothing to the characters in the story. It changes nothing. They have never met Khan before. It is an alternate timeline. It changes absolutely nothing. But it's supposed to be shocking to the audience because of another movie that they saw before, where he was like the best villain. And that was also a terribly kept secret because people were like, he's playing Khan, isn't he? He's playing Khan? No, he's playing John Harrison. And then he's revealed to be Khan. And it's like, yeah, we knew, he's basically Khan already, killing people left and right. So, it's not shocking. The reveal of like an piece of information somebody already knew about somebody doesn't change anything. It has to change something within the characters themselves. So that's why this movie sucks. And the action sequences aren't well directed, although I did not think that they would be. I hope that they would drill down on characters, but the problem is the characters are super thinly written. And of course, again, Mark L. Smith wrote the script, and none of his characters ever have any depth. Leonardo DiCaprio winning for The Revenant is a joke because he just won because he was Leonardo DiCaprio and it was his time. But, like, what do we know about Hugh Glass? Oh, he had a son who was a native, and he died, and that's his revenge. And Alexandre Gonzalez Inarritu uses that as strength of being like, he wants this. Tom Hardy's character just wants to get paid and to leave. He sees how unreasonable it is to take care of you, and he just wants it done with and stuff. And you believe his motivations. And it's kind of interesting because between that and Twisters, Anthony Ramos' character, Javi, you see that same Tom Hardiness of good supporting acting, where Anthony Ramos, and why I like him, is that he's the only one in this movie who seems like he's a legitimate character. He likes Stacey Edgar Jones's Kate, pines after her, wants her, will do anything for her. And at the same time, wants to recruit her for, the evil Storm company he works for, who's evil because, related to land ownership, and I don't want to give too much away, but it's, land baron type stuff. It's like, oh, they work for the insurance company. And then she's surprised that the people that she thought were bad, who were the scummy YouTubers, which could have been, like, they could have been way more scummy. Okay, these are YouTubers, okay? They're not paid very well. They sell merchandise. Like, they could have been a lot more desperate, a lot more scrappy, and they could have actually just made Glenn Powell's character, like, imagine if he was dumb. Like, imagine if he wasn't, I'm gonna spoil it at this point, so it's not a major spoiler. I'm not revealing any character deaths or anything like this, but it's like, Glenn Powell's character is revealed to be a meteorologist, and shock to Kate, wait, this guy is actually smart? I think differently of him now. And it's like, can you imagine how much more interesting it would be if he wasn't? If he, like, won her over based on the fact that he, like, actually doesn't have a degree? And they're like, well, he's the smart one. He doesn't want to tell anyone. Which, if you've ever met anybody with, an accomplishment to them in their field, they'll tell you. Like I just told you, I had a communications degree, and that's worthless. Like, somebody with a university degree at some point will tell you that they have a university degree, which I find, just funny. I don't know. But again, it's like, oh, maybe his character is the strong silent type. Again, we don't know because we learn nothing about his character except that he's super psychically convenient. This is where a character always shows up at the right time, even though nobody asked him to be there. He's not texting anyone. He's just there, right place, right time. When the character needs to do this and stuff, he shows up. And I'm more spoiler territory here, so you can plug your ears for this, like, next minute. But it's like, he shows up at her mother's house when she is there, meaning he followed her either across state lines, like in Arkansas or something, and just showed up. And and I went to the bathroom, like, for the fastest pee that I ever had. Went there, and I slipped going down the stairs too. And a guy said to me, "Oh, you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." On my way out, go in, come back. 30 seconds later, she's at her house. I knew that she was the character in the movie, was going to her house and everything like that. So, like, she's in the back of the barn, and then he just shows up, and I don't ask because I don't like to talk during movies. The one place I don't like to talk, but I think to myself, like, did she tell him where she was going or something? And then he has a line of like, yeah, I found out because one of the people told me about you and stuff. It's like, well, that doesn't explain how you knew the address of her mother's house. It's like, I don't know, if they had a scene or something of like the yellow pages or the phone book or like something. Like, that's the only time when you can know somebody's address without permission. They don't put that on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram unless they own a business or something. So it was, to me, I'm like, oh, that's flimsy screenwriting right there, because it's just unearned, and they haven't spent any significant time together. He gets her pizza, and they sit down for bull riding or something, and then talk for 2 seconds, and then a tornado hits. But they don't like. There's no scene, and I've seen many great tornado scenes. One of them is in this movie called The Lucky Ones, with Rachel McAdams, Tim Robbins, and Michael Pena. And there's this moment of like a tornado is going to hit, and it's like, oh shoot, we got to climb in a pipe and stuff like that. And it's just Michael Pena, and Michael Pena is like, I want to die, and Rachel McAdams is like, don't be silly. And they had to get like really close together and bundle together tightly in the pipe or whatever, the almost like a sewer pipe or wall pipe or something together. And they had to be like super close and intimate and stuff. And that's like a very romantic scene. Another scene is in 1883, really good and enjoyable miniseries. And it's like the girl is with an Indian guy, and she's like, oh, I'm scared, like in every single Taylor Sheridan show, where every woman is either like a 10 out of 10 butch who like likes to stir trouble and likes the bad boys and stuff, or is like an innocent, ineffective dweeb loser liability and absolutely everything, always getting captured, little princess type who's also like gorgeous. Anyway, she's like hysterical. There's no other way to put it. And then uh, and then the guy's like, stay down, stay down. There's a tornado. And then she's like rolling over, and then like putting her head down, and then she leans in, and like they like make out because it's such a dramatic, intense moment, and it's super cheese cornball, but it works because it's like it's well paced. It comes at the right time, but like none of that happens in Twister. Like the one time you could have done that with like strangers is you could literally physically using the storm throw any two characters together and have them be together physically, intimately. And it doesn't do that. The first Twister is basically about a movie that people in the industry know, His Girl Friday. It's a movie from like the 40s about a guy who's getting divorced and getting divorced from his wife, and she's getting married to another guy, and they need to work together essentially. And this flips it where it's like a guy who's getting divorced, he's getting married, and they need to work together, and they like refine their love in the most unlikely of places. That's the emotional core of Twister. The Bill Paxton getting together with Helen Hunt. People like getting together with Helen Hunt. I mentioned last time, I believe, that I saw Castaway, and Tom Hanks wanting to get back to Helen Hunt. Something about her. Anyway, that movie had a lot of character. Twister, from the director of Speed. He's a good director. It's a shame that after Lara Croft Tomb Raider Cradle of Life, which was just, it's a mediocre movie, but, he could have made another movie after that, and he didn't. But he made Speed, which is an excellent movie, 1994, Keanu Reeves, Sandra Bullock, and then he made this. This was the follow-up. And if you watch the teaser trailer on YouTube of Twister, it is so perfect because it's like you hear the air raid siren, which is one of the spookiest sounds. And it's like, and then it's like, and then the title flies in. It's like Warner Brothers Pictures and Universal Pictures present. And it's not words, it's just like the title on the screen. It's silence of the wind rustling, cut to cars flying, intense destruction, scariness, cut to black, cut to black, cut to black, cut to black. It's like an Amblin Entertainment production. It's like from the producers of Jurassic Park, which, if you're thinking in 1996, it's like 3 years after Jurassic Park was, at the time, the biggest movie of all time. It's like the equivalent of like an Inception when Christopher Nolan, it's like from Christopher Nolan, the director of The Dark Knight. You're like, oh my God, this is the next movie you're seeing in theaters. It's like from the producers of Jurassic Park and the director of Speed, Twister. And you're like, shoot, I gotta go in May. And then that's when movies actually started opening in May, because Jaws came out in June, and that started the summer blockbuster, but that was only in June, and then they pushed it to May. And then there was a time when with the Avengers movie, came out at the late end of April, but that didn't stick. But now it's pretty much like you can program a 100 million opener in pretty much every single month. Like, it proved that, because it came out September 8th when School came out, and September is like historically the lowest box office month. And it blew the doors off all expectations. They're like, okay, you can have 100 million opener in any month, but Twisters was the first one to open in May, which is now like one of the biggest months ever to open. Famously, Spider-Man 3, Shrek 3, Pirates of the Caribbean 3 all opened in May of 2007. Spider-Man 3, 153 million. Shrek the Third, 122 million. Pirates of the Caribbean, 114 million, 139 million, which was that a disappointment, or it was the best Memorial Day opening of all time? I don't know. But it was only, 6 months after. This was week to week to week, so it was impressive. and they wanted to keep the release date of like Barbenheimer last year. Both Warner Brothers and Universal own those movies. They're like, okay, we're gonna stick to that. We're not gonna do last weekend, even though we totally should have, even though it's a different audience. But like Universal was like, Twisters, there's a small chance it could flop, so let's just give it enough breathing room between that and Despicable Me. So Despicable Me comes out on July 4th, collects a lot of money for Universal, and then comes out on July 18th because it's like Warner Brothers' date is like the third weekend in July. They did it with Christopher Nolan. They did it without Christopher Nolan with Barbie. They did it with the Harry Potter summer movies. Most of them, about 3 of them. That would have been 5, 6, and 7 part 1. Yeah. Half-Blood Prince was July, yeah. No, 5, 6, and 7 part 2. Because they had 2 full years between 5 and 6, which was the longest gap. But anyway, they did that, and with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory bit. And Stanley Kubrick chose that date as well for Eyes Wide Shut after getting, the receipts from the accountants. Back then, there was no online of like, oh, I'm going to study the chart and pick my date. But it's like, Christopher Nolan low-key trying to copy Kubrick, as he says, similar to how he kept mentioning 2001: A Space Odyssey when talking about Interstellar, and like completely set the wrong expectations for that movie, which is totally cornball. And now Interstellar has the reputation it deserves, and people think much more highly of it, even though it's still primarily ridiculous because the central twist of it, teeter-tottering on the edge of, humanity and stuff, and all the threats is like they cross-cut between Topher Grace being worried and Jason Bourne kicking Matthew McConaughey's ass. And Matthew McConaughey being left to die, and it's like they're cross-cutting away from that across space and time, eons, and they're cutting to Topher Grace being worried that Casey Affleck is going to come back. And what? Like, kill Jessica Chastain? I don't think so. It doesn't work. And then there's a major exposition dump, which is Christopher Nolan's weakness. And it's just they dump a pile of information. McConaughey works through it, but, like, it's so confusing to the audience, and it's so much, and it feels like an afterthought. The entire third act of that was rewritten after Steven Spielberg dropped out of making that movie. And because Jonathan Nolan didn't write it for his brother, he wrote it for Spielberg, and then Spielberg left. He's like, what about my baby brother? It's like, well, doesn't he usually work with Warner Brothers? It's like, oh, well, we'll do, I'm already on this. Let me ask my baby brother. And then, they work it out at Paramount, and then Warner Brothers is also like, well, we like money. Let's, can we co-produce on this? We'll give you some money, and we'll, excuse me. We'll give you some money, and we'll, and join this co-production. It's like the movie's 180 million. And it's like it's going to be a seat fee, and they're like, we don't care, and it ends up making like 689 million. And as a result, they like traded rights, which didn't even end up mattering anyway. But like Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers and Paramount like switched the rights, and it's funny because I could go longer on this, and this is a tangent, but I'm going to get it anyway, is that Warner Brothers took the rights, or New Line Cinema took the rights to the Friday the 13th franchise. They bought them from Paramount in the 90s to produce the Jason movies, Jason Voorhees, Jason X, Friday the 13th. And New Line was bought by Warner Brothers, so Warner Brothers had the rights to Friday the 13th. And they had made the last one in 2009. And they're like, okay, well, in order to cut us in on Interstellar, we will give you the rights back, Paramount, to that. And Paramount was like, okay, well, we need to give something to, well, we'll give you the rights to the South Park movies. And basically they ended up reneging on that because after they signed a new deal with Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they did TV specials of South Park, and released them saying that they're like movies exclusive to the streaming service. And then Warner Brothers is like, shouldn't those be on Max, like our streaming service, because you gave us that deal? And they're like, well, no, it's like a TV show, so it's not like the same thing. Anyway, that'll be fought in court or settled or something, but it's kind of funny. And then there was both so much bickering that they like both lost the rights to Friday the 13th. They went back to the creator, and then the creator sued the writer of the movie and the director whose production company was, and they got sued, and then they split up the rights, and then they're like, okay, forget it, we're going to make a TV show about it. And then they hire Brian Fuller, who makes Hannibal, brilliant TV series, by the way, that I suggest watching, at least for its first 2 seasons. Absolutely one of the best episodes of all time is the season 2 finale of Hannibal. Totally worth watching if you see it on Netflix or Amazon Prime or wherever. But Brian Fuller fights all the time with the people he's supposed to be making TV with. And what happens is that show doesn't end up happening, Crystal Lake. The, American Gods, which he ended Hannibal basically to make, he ends up leaving that show. Somebody else hires that. So, like, Brian Fuller, brilliant. Star Trek Discovery, he started, and he's like, we're hiring Soneca Martin Green, who was on The Walking Dead. And they were like, we need to get green light on this Star Trek TV show. And Brian Fuller is like, I realize that, but I'm going to get the right person for the job, and we are going to wait for her in order for this to be good, because it's worth it for quality reasons. Soneca Martin Green played Sasha Williams on The Walking Dead. I always get confused between her and Michonne, because I don't watch The Walking Dead, really. The actress who plays Michonne is Denai Guerrera, from Black Panther. But anyways, the rights get tangled and whatnot. It's so fascinating. I could go on forever and ever and ever, but it doesn't matter. The point is that, I went from Christopher Nolan to Interstellar. Warner Brothers chooses that date, and that's why they chose that for Twisters. And next week is Deadpool, which is going to blow the doors off, and people are kind of like, well, is Twisters going to hold well? Because this weekend box office, getting to it, Twisters is the number one movie with $80.5 million. They list Universal as the distributor, which I find weird. Oh, right, because Universal is the domestic distributor and Warner Brothers has international. This is so weird because the first Twister, Warner Brothers distributed in North America and Universal Pictures did international, but this time they switched places. I guess because Warner Brothers is like, well, this will internationally make more money, and Universal was like, oh, okay, fine. Spielberg works with primarily Universal now, so he's made a few movies with Warner Brothers, but they're like, okay, well, this takes place in Oklahoma and is about tornadoes in a very specific American setting. Obviously, we'll do domestic. And then Warner Brothers was like, well, people like seeing America get destroyed, so, your loss. So it hasn't opened worldwide in a lot of other places. It's made like $42 million thus far, but who cares? They're both companies. They'll do well. But this movie makes $80.5 million. The first Twister in 1996 made about $40 million, which is actually $80 million today. So it opened to about the same that the first one did, even adjusted for inflation. That's very impressive. Even though I didn't find the movie itself that impressive. The way that it ends, it's like, I don't care. And then this is the thing. This is kind of a spoiler, but I mentioned before, and again, it's not a big spoiler. It's not a spoilerish movie. The most spoiled thing is once you know where it's going after the opening scene, then there's that. But I don't think it's spoiler to say that there is no romance in this movie. There was a kiss that they filmed, and they didn't include it. Why? Because Steven Spielberg, who's an executive producer at Amblin Entertainment, made it, gave a note that said, we're going to save it basically for another movie, a sequel. It gives us a lane to go in. And the important thing is Kate's career fulfillment, and she knows what it is for herself, and it's her story. And every single woman on Twitter like rolled her eyes at this. It's like, yeah, she can have fulfillment in both ways, like career fulfillment and romantic fulfillment. Like, yeah, she can own the Twister and wrangle her past and stuff, but she can also smooch a hot guy. Like, what's the deal here? And people were like, all time greatest blunder. And then somebody mentioned, who's like a bigger nerd than I am about movies, it's like, this is akin to Jeffrey Katzenberg taking out this musical number because he saw a kid yawning during the test screenings. And somebody's like, anybody who was not enthusiastic about that kiss is my mortal enemy during the test screenings. Which, by the way, if you're ever down in California, somebody's like, want to go see a movie, it's probably like a famous movie that they're conducting a test screening for. They have you sign an NDA and stuff like that, but you get to see an unfinished movie because these major movies, like, they film them, they don't finish the special effects, but they let you do like a test screening. Then you fill out a form of like, I didn't like this, I didn't like this, I didn't like this. Yeah, go see a test screening. And if you're in LA, but Twisters, number one, $80.5 million. Number two, Despicable Me 4, which 259 in America, 574 worldwide. This movie costs, I haven't actually checked. Because it's, the reviews are uninspired. But the main theme song to this movie, which, by the way, was written by Mike White, who I mentioned earlier, the School of Rock writer and White Lotus guy. I just kind of find that funny. Yeah, this movie cost $100 million, and it's made $574 million. So, profit deal. Pharrell Williams wrote the song and the theme for it, and the song is called Double Life. And people think it's a Drake diss track. It's actually a good song. I can't play it for you for copyright reasons, but it's kind of funny. Also funny, in addition to being written by Mike White, it also stars Miranda Cosgrove, who, again, the one who actually does cuss a little, who was in School of Rock as the band manager. Currently uninspired. I still haven't seen Despicable Me 3. Why? Because I wanted to watch it with my nephew, and my nephew has no desire to watch Despicable Me 3. And I don't blame him, because I watched Despicable Me 1, and I remember the trailer for that being played for like a year of like, oh, what happened to the Great Pyramid of Giza and blah, blah, blah. And it was thing, and it ends up doing fabulously well. Comes out like 9 months after Megamind, which people of my age like really like. I find it like an interesting premise, kind of underexplored, but as like, what if a villain won? What if it was about the villain and he won, and then he's like, what do I do with my life? That's like an interesting premise. It's going to be like a live action movie with Ben Stiller and stuff, and then, it ends up being animated, and Will Ferrell and Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt sings the song, and it's like, I have got eyes that can see right through lead. Anyway, so that comes out, decent hit. Despicable Me 1 comes out, major hit. And I watched it, and I was like, not as good as I thought it would be. And then Despicable Me 2 is a good movie. It's a good movie. And then Despicable Me, they decide to do Minions, like just a spinoff that's just about the Minions, and that ends up making $1 billion. People are like, wow. And then they flip back to Despicable Me 3, which, again, I haven't seen. And then they flip back to Minions: The Rise of Gru, which I rented, because my nephew did want to see that. And I watched it, and I'm like, this is pretty decent. It's a pretty decent movie. So Despicable Me 2 and Minions: The Rise of Gru, which is the second Minions movie, are both good. But Despicable Me 1, 4, allegedly 3, uninspired. So, yeah. So, moving on. Despicable Me 4, profit deal. Moving down the list, Inside Out 2. This movie has made an absurd amount of money. It has made, are you ready for this? $1.4 billion. Obviously, it's the highest grossing movie of the year. But if I go to all time, and you always unadjust for inflation all the time and stuff like that, domestically, it's not really, it's not really there. What? Oh, I hate it when I don't open up a new tab. Ugh. So Inside Out 2 has made domestically $596 million. It is the number 15 domestic highest grossing movie of all time. But, things change and people are like, worldwide, what is the highest grossing movie of all time worldwide? Of course, the answer is Avatar with $2.9 billion, followed by Avengers Endgame, followed by Avatar 2, believe it or not, followed by Titanic. 3 of the 4 are James Cameron movies. But anyways, and then you get, Spider-Man No Way Home, number 7, Top Gun Maverick, number 12. Or is it? Because now, I went to the exact same page, man. I am something else. So, Inside Out 2 has now made $1.43 billion. Top Gun Maverick has made $1.495 billion. Inside Out 2 is going to make more money. Now, adjust for inflation, maybe it's still not there. But Inside Out 2 is going to make more money than Top Gun Maverick. Isn't that insane? Inside Out 2. And kids rule the world. I mentioned this when If came out, which I still haven't seen. It's on Paramount Plus. And oh shoot, it's July 22nd, so I better watch that. Or try and watch that soon, because I'm going to stop paying for Paramount Plus. Did I cancel that yet? Now I need to go to ParamountPlus.com. Oh dear. Thanks for reminding me, guys. And then it's going to take me to... Okay, is it going to let me go to my thing? Is it going to let me go to my thing? That's not where I wanted to go, guys. And down to accounts and... Next billing date. Well, when was I last billed? Did I forget to... Oh, did I forget to can... This is how they get you. This is how they get you. Okay. Of course, it's going to make me enter my password again. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I could leave it on if I wanted, but it's a security issue. Who cares about me? Not me, but, the things that we do. I thought I paid this. Oh, I forget it's the weekend. Shoot. Ugh. You set an alarm. Well, I better get the friggin' Quiet Place movie now then. You set the alarm for... And I have money because the Trudeau checks of the carbon tax and whatnot, and all of those are back. So I'm in good shape. I'm literally back to all the money that I lost over the few months just spending here and there. But I forgot to cancel my Paramount Plus right after it went back up to $10, and I meant to cancel that. Switch to what is the switch to annual here? So now it's getting me to switch to annual. $62 a year for annual. Auto renews unless canceled. Okay, now I need to cancel this. Let's cancel subscription. Using another service. Price is too high. And technical difficulties. I would say price is too high. Okay, so now it's going to be August 21st. Yeah. Okay, so I better get access to the Quiet Place Day 1 movie. That better come out on Paramount Plus before. Because that'll be fun. I paid $12.42 for that. It's very annoying. And they're raising prices again. Anyways, at least I got that covered. So, I have, at number 4, Long Legs. Which, surprisingly, for a horror movie, especially one that didn't get, the best word of mouth, according to the cinema score, which is a poll where they ask 400 people, maybe, at random theaters, after they come out with them. What'd you think? What'd you give it after an A? And they do all this poll testing crap. And then they apply that to millions of people, which is why the extrapolating data doesn't always work. Because they're like, oh, well, this movie won't get good word of mouth because it got like a C- or something like that. And then a movie ends up doing well anyways. They're like, oh, I don't know. But anyways, Longlegs, second week, comes out last weekend. It's by Neon. Neon is in one of the major movie studios. And it opens to $22 million, which is huge for somebody who's not Universal, Walt Disney, Paramount, Columbia, Warner Brothers, or Sony. And A24, it funny enough, had a big opening at the end of April with Civil War. But like it, aside from a year ago, the blip that was Sound of Freedom by Angel Studios, like opening huge and doing great business and stuff. It's not often that a movie will break out, and this movie just had an excellent obscure marketing campaign where they would show you creepy 15-second videos and stuff, and it was all mostly online. They didn't use traditional television ads, which they don't really anymore, but they showed something obscure and then something creepy or macabre happening, and they basically presented, here's the next serial killer story. It stars Micah Monroe, who was in It Follows, The Guest, Watcher, which was like a streaming movie. Well, it released in theaters, but it did well on streaming too. Shudder and the like, very well, was well directed. So she's kind of like the de facto Scream Queen. Here's her. She's a female FBI agent. It's directed by Osgood Perkins, who is the son of Anthony Perkins, who directed the Psycho sequels and was in Psycho, the original, as Norman Bates. Osgood Perkins also was in Legally Blonde as like the weird guy who looks, in my opinion, a bit Will Ferrell-like. If I can get him all the way through. But he was in, a bunch of stuff. Of course, it says that he's in it, but because his character isn't, huge and stuff, they don't list his character name. David Kidney. Yeah, just Kidney. Or David. Anyway, he's in that movie. And it's funny because he is just as socially awkward in real life, but who cares, because his movie was a hit. And it held well, which horror movies like never do. They usually crater or lose 2/3 of their audience. But this movie opened at 22 million, now has made 11, done a few million extra worldwide. But this movie was acquired for less than 10 million. So it's very impressive that it's like was bought for 10 million and has now made 20, and he's already in post-production on his next movie. That's cool. But and many people have seen it, but this movie cost like 10 to 16 million. It was acquired for 10 and stuff, but it made 16, opened to 22, and then has made 11. So it's like 44 million, cost 16. Like, it's already made 3 times its budget. It's doing well. The most annoying thing are people are like, oh, it's terrible for horror. Horror's in the toilet now. And it's like, no, it's just the movies that were coming out were like mismarketed. They're like these new people who are amateur box office production analysts who do zero analysis and came up during the time of Disney's legendary 2019 run where everything made $1 billion and it seemed very easy. And then people were like, oh no, like the multi-billion-dollar movie studio isn't making money. Movies are doomed. And it's like, no, it's just people didn't think the first Omen looked good. So they didn't see it because they didn't know what the plot was. And it doesn't matter that it got good reviews because people didn't know what it is. That's why it didn't do well. And then it ended up like doing well anyways. They might have spent a bit more money marketing it because Disney, as you know, sucks at marketing anything that doesn't already exist in some kind of franchise. But anyways, like that didn't do super well. And I watched the movie and it was actually like the last 10 minutes bungled that movie so much. Like it's impressive up until then. They should have like once she gets out and has her little freak out in front of the church, it's like the movie essentially should have stopped. because it would have been like a cool possession movie up until then. But anyways, that movie doesn't do strongly, and then the Blumhouse movie that opened the first time of the year like did barely okay despite being terrible. And then Lionsgate also did like a movie which did sort of okay, but there's no horror breakouts. And then this one's a horror breakout, which I would characterize as a thriller. Like, if there's not a high body count in your movie, I haven't seen it, I don't know, then I would consider it like a thriller. Like, thriller is keeping you on the edge of your seat, not a high body count, but there's a lot of like running. You're constantly tense. And that to me is what a thriller is. Horror is more macabre. It's basically like a slasher or a monster movie. There's a lot of blood. You could consider The Shining a thriller or a horror because it's like some of the imagery in that is horrific, like the fountain of blood, the Danny screaming face and stuff like that. Like I can see that. I can see either, but like a horror movie like where the character, the hero is powerless in dealing with something like bigger than humanity, whereas thrillers are just kind of like race against the clock. So if it's like a detective, that's like a race against the clock to me. That's like a thriller, not a horror movie. People think like Silence of the Lambs is like a horror movie. It's like, yeah, there's horrific imagery in it, but it's basically about the hunt for a serial killer. So, I wouldn't consider that a horror movie, but I'm a stickler for, designations and stuff. But anyways, number 5, Quiet Place Day 1. It's doing fine. 240 worldwide, 127 domestic. I'll watch it when it comes on Paramount Plus. Number 6, Fly Me to the Moon. This movie wasn't negotiated to come to theaters at all, but Apple at the time was just like, yeah, we'll throw it in theaters. Columbia Pictures decided to distribute it. It doesn't do super well. Because it's super freaking long. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes and it's a rom-com. What are we doing here? Remember the time when studio executives were like, oh, this movie has to be under 2 hours no matter what. Bah. And people were like, oh, studio executives are stupid. Now we have to sit through friggin' 3 hour and 2.5 hour movies that are fine when they're good or earn their length. And now movies just don't. They're just like, people don't know how to edit. And they're like, oh, this is fine. Like, this is going to be 2.5 hours. I'm sorry, but like, Challengers, the Zendaya film, is like 100, it's a 90-minute movie stretched out to 2 hours and 10 minutes. And it's like, what are we doing here? Okay, like, this is ridiculous. Number 7, Bad Boys, Ride or Die. Yeah, it's doing well. Not as well as the first, but it's doing well. And then, go down. People have said this movie, Oddity, which made $703, and this is people on Twitter, so beware. They're like, forget Longlegs, this is the best movie of the year. Which, by the way, I saw a lot of people saying Longlegs didn't work for me. The same people who are like, Twisters didn't work for me. But that's the top 10 box office. So, yeah. Do I have anything else on my list? I have the Bear review, which I find so funny because my last thing was all about the Bear, and I didn't finish the Bear. So I'll just say I finished the Bear. I found it disappointing because nothing significant happens. And it turns out, surprisingly, the majority of people who've seen this season agreed with me that they're like, oh, this season isn't as good as the last. And somebody's like, well, when you have such a high quality, it's unreasonable to expect them to keep it. I'm like, it's a TV show. No, it doesn't. Like, TV shows can keep their quality for like 2 or 3 seasons. If it can't sustain it, then yeah, it should have been like a movie or something. But yeah, I had, so people agreed with me, but yeah, the Emmy nominations are out now, and I believe I will be, if I do decide to go see to TIFF this year, which I don't know, I have less money every year, and I feel guilty because I don't have a job. So why am I going to, celebrate and go party somewhere in Toronto, especially when I don't have a whole lot of money? But again, I've never had a whole lot of money my whole life, so it's a good habit, I guess. I know what to spend it on. Anyway, complete list from the New York Times. Okay, best drama: Shogun, The Crown, The Morning Show, The Gilded Age, Slow Horses, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Fallout, and Three Body Problem. So I've seen first few episodes of Three Body Problem. it sucks. Fallout, it's okay. Like, I get through the whole thing, there's not much story. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's good, and the ending is a bit rushed. Slow Horses, first season, watchable. Second season, first episode, I'm out. It's just like stupid. The Gilded Age, my mom loves it. Morning Show, a terrible show that is in the pocket of Emmy voters that they nominate anyway. This is why this is rigged. The Crown, the last season, people didn't like it at all. And then Shogun, a show that is so boring and so stretched out that it's like, because it has the illusion of prestige, it should win. My pick, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, is the best one here. What's actually going to win, they're going to give it to Shogun. Because it, like, checks all the boxes of, like, ooh, foreign, exciting, bold. They spent a lot of money on it. Cinematic. That's what's winning. Best comedy. Abbott Elementary, The Bear, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Hacks, Only Murders in the Building, Palm Royale, Reservation Dogs, and What We Do in the Shadows. Now, what should win is Abbott Elementary because that's the only one that's like an actual comedy. Curb Your Enthusiasm also is a comedy, so you could give it to that. Hacks isn't funny. I watched the first episode. I'm like, this sucks. Only Murders in the Building. I gave that like 3 episodes, and I'm like, I want to like Martin Short. I want to like Selena Gomez. I don't mind Steve Martin, and I just wasn't in on it. And it's like a movie that feels, a TV show, sorry, that feels like a psyop of like the show that your friend wants you to get into that you don't want to. Palm Royale, my mom saw and liked. Reservation Dogs, people say it's so great. Haven't watched it. What We Do in the Shadows, you see all the clips of like, this is how we speak in Tucson, Arizona. Or I don't give an F. His name was Mike. There's, you see the TikTok and Instagram clips of that, of Matthew Berry, who also does a voice on Fallout. So it's like, that's funny. I could see that winning. I wouldn't mind seeing that winning because it feels like Abbott Elementary is one. The Bear shouldn't be there. We all know this. The only reason it's there is because it's a half hour, so it's considered a comedy, and that's just how bad it is. Best limited series should be Shogun because it's based on a book, and they're going to adapt a different time period, so it's not like it's a limited or anthology series, but Baby Reindeer, Fargo, Lessons in Chemistry, Ripley, True Detective, Night Country. What's the best here? I have not seen Baby Reindeer yet. Fargo, I've sang the praises, and it's like, season 1 is good. Season 2 is like interesting. Season 3 is like, don't like it. It's boring. Season 4 I skipped. Season 5 is a comeback. Season 5 is like, ooh, we're back to like season 1, 2 territory here. So Fargo should absolutely win here. Ripley, super slow start. Ended up barely picking it up. True Detective, Night Country straight up sucks. The critics lied to you on that being good because it checks all the diversity boxes and has the HBO name and looks fancy and has the right names behind it. So to enough people, that's like, well, that's good enough for them. And then Baby Reindeer mistakenly sold as like a true story, and then they got sued for it because the person who one of the characters was based on was like, this isn't right at all, you just made that up. And then the creator was like, well, it's emotionally true. And it's like, oh, great, that's what we're doing. Lessons in Chemistry, the Brie Larson show, I have no interest in, but my mom really liked it, so, it's like, through my parents, we cover a lot, but Fargo gets my vote. Fargo and then Ripley. Best Actress, Anna Sawai from Shogun, Jennifer Aniston, who can't act, Reese Witherspoon, who can act, but it's not a good show, Imelda Staunton, who gave the best performance in the entire Harry Potter series, Maya Erskine, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and Carrie Coon, The Gilded Age. Carrie Coon, probably one of the best actresses here, although Imelda Staunton is actually. Don't care about any of these people winning. Like, it's like, somebody said, why Richard Lawson, who if you listen to other podcasts, listen to Little Gold Men, it's all about award show talk and stuff, and they do cover the Emmys. They're very passionate about it, and Richard Lawson is like, morning show sucks. Why did they need to nominate Jennifer Aniston? Could have nominated a bunch of other people. The show isn't good, but Emmy voters like celebrities, so that's basically what we're dealing with here. They just pick the same 5 shows every year, and then just pick that. So don't care who wins. at all. Won't change anybody's life. Best Actor, Donald Glover, Idris Elba, Walton Goggins, Gary Oldman, Hiroyuki Sanada, and Dominic West. Don't care about any of these people winning. I like Walton Goggins for Fallout. I like Gary Oldman. I even like Hiroyuki Sanada. None of these people did work that I thought was like awards worthy. I thought what Donald Glover did was interesting in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but like, you know, like who cares? And I think that Donald Glover has already won an Emmy before, may, for Community or something else that he was on that I'm missing that I can't think of here. So if I go to, it's difficult because he's won Grammys. I found it funny how he was like, "Oh, it's ridiculous that I have more Grammys than Will Smith." It's like it's not Donald Glover. You're more talented than Will Smith. Um, but yeah, if I can go down to filmography and television, like this is super annoying because I just want to find the awards that he has won, and it's not letting me. Like, where is it? List of awards won by. Okay, is it gonna say it in the first paragraph? It's an American. I know. See, he would have won for Atlanta, is what I can't believe I'm missing Atlanta. Yeah, he won 2 primetime Emmys for it, so I don't care if he wins here. Best Actor Comedy, Matt Berry. That's who I want to win. I just referenced him. He's funny. Haven't seen him win an Emmy. Haven't seen him win any awards. I'd have him win. Steve Martin doesn't need to be Larry David, Martin Short, Jeremy Allen White, the person from Reservation Dogs. I mean, sure, I haven't seen that, but like Matt Berry is the one who like he makes me laugh. Pick him. Best Actress, Jean Smart from Hacks. She's great. Whatever, but didn't she already win Quinta Brunson? Didn't she already win Isla Debris? Didn't she already win Kirsten Wiig? Didn't she already win Selena Gomez? Can't Act, Maya Rudolph, Loot? Don't care about any of these. Best Actress, a limited TV series or TV movie. Don't care. Sofia Vergara, Naomi Watts, Juno Temple. Who she's the one who it's like I want Fargo to win. Like, it's the only great show on here. Good for Sofia Vergara for getting nominated, but Juno Temple on Fargo is great. It's a great performance. Like it's good work is being done there. I want it recognized. I want people to pay more attention to Fargo. It's so weird, by the way, because the movie was like a major hit, and this is now like in its 5th season, and it's still a show that not a whole lot of people watch. I get it. My mom watched all of it, or minus the 4th season, which I didn't, but again, first season, every season is a new story. It all connects back to the movie somehow in the timeline, which is cool. Brilliantly written dialogue, wonderfully distinct, colorful characters. Fargo is a good show, and this one takes place in 2019. The first one takes place in early 2000s. The second season takes place in like the 70s or the 80s. The third season takes place in the 90s, and then the 4th season takes place in like the 50s, and then the 5th season 2010s and stuff. Best Actor Limited Series or Movie, Matt Bomer, don't care. John Hamm, sure, for Fargo, why not? Richard Gadd, Baby Reindeer, still haven't seen Baby Reindeer. Tom Hollander, I wouldn't mind seeing him win something. He talked about how he has the same agent at one time as Tom Holland. Tom Hollander was in they called him Miami Beach in Bohemian Rhapsody, but he was Lord Beckett, the bad guy. In Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3, he's the short guy. And he's just, he was the one who thought the gay friend of Jennifer Coolidge in The White Lotus, she's like, the gays are trying to kill me. They thought he was one of them. And then Andrew Scott and Ripley, who is like way too old to be there. But I wouldn't mind seeing Tom Hollander, and I hear that he's good. He's playing Capote, who's such a character that's easy to play, in my opinion. But I wouldn't mind him. Or John Hamm winning. But overall, I don't care too much. But I like Tom Hollander because he's a good actor, and I want him to be recognized. And I don't think he's really been recognized before. Um, Fun fact about Hollander: Tom Hollander and Tom Holland were both inducted into the Academy as the Academy Awards in the uh, on the same day, and he was also in Pride and Prejudice as Mr. Collins. Yeah, I mentioned Lord Beckett in Parts of the Caribbean, Gosford Park, About Time, Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. He is um, the Prime Minister, I think, in that. If I can find out, let me see. Yeah, he's the Prime Minister of the UK. So that's it for the Emmy categories, pretty much. I'll also mention Variety Talk Series, which they separated because John Oliver kept winning it. So they just paired him with Saturday Night Live. But for Variety Talk Series, I would give it to The Daily Show, which this last year was good. Like, I don't watch any individual episodes. You see clips and bits. I mean, it's a variety series. But the rotation of guests with relevant commentary, Jon Stewart might say something, but he can't be that way all the time. And then Ronnie Chang will say something funny, and then some guest will say something funny, and it's always insightful and interesting. It's the right time for it. Jimmy Kimmel Live, Seth Meyers, Stephen Colbert, they're all, like, dare I say, mediocre, and just kind of do the same tricks week to week, and they're just on too much. When they have a good guest on, they very rarely exploit it correctly. So yeah. And then, oh my gosh, for TV movie here, Unfrosted the Pop Tarts Story was nominated. What a terrible movie. I just ate Pop Tarts right before I started recording this, and Pop Tarts are important to me, but Unfrosted the Pop Tart Story is an awful, just straight up awful thing. And you know what? This is such a crook thing that, like, I will never read the Emmy nominations to you again. This is my defiance right here. My little defiance is that it's such a scam. I'd like to see it because I like seeing, people, and it's something to watch with my brother when we're there. But in because we watched it last time. But, like, yeah, I don't care for any of this. Um, Hiro Murai for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. First Date, I believe, is the first episode, so I'd I'd get that picked for directing for a drama series. And then don't remember any of it. Yeah, the Fishes episode of The Bear, sure. Like, we all know that's gonna win anyway because that is the most yelling and stuff like that. Uh, and then just some of the stuff, because it's like they blatantly pick stuff that, like, the ending of Fallout. Fallout isn't a well written uh show. The only interesting episode that's well written is always the pilot. So them doing, I'm just, it's great that Fallout is being recognized. However, it's the writing in it isn't good. And as soon as the uh uh character, I always want to call him Zep, um Michael Emerson, that as soon as Michael Emerson's character dies, the intrigue of the show dies. And it's just kind of like flat for the rest of it. I'm sure it'll be an interesting second season that we'll have to wait 2 years for, but yeah. So that's the Emmys right there. So I finished seeing Twisters, and I begin writing my review, and I that is when, right coming out of it, the last episode where I review it with my dad, and you can listen to that, the episode right before here. It's a good review. I took out all of the pauses and stuff. Not all of the pauses, but ones that made sense, and the dead air and stuff like that. But you can listen to and get our live thoughts much better on that. But then, so Donald Trump gets inaugurated Friday. And I go see the movie and stuff, and then what happens? I feel like I'm missing a big event, but today Joe Biden dropped out of the Democratic race for the presidency and announces that he is not going to seek re-election. He's going to focus on finishing out his term, which I even wonder because now, of course, Don Lemon and the ultra left are pushing. It's like, why not go further? Why not have him completely resigned now and have Kamala Harris take over so that she can have a record to run on? And I'm like, is this a joke to you? Do you not care about policy at all? Like, it doesn't matter to you that, like, he's been the most effective administration of our modern lifetime? Um, and you don't care about that. You just want to score political points. It's just, they're all vultures. He was forced out. Yes, he was old. Yes, he was falling apart. He was at cognitive decline, like any 82-year-old. But he's going against a madman. So, administration to administration, he's better. But of course, there are rumors of like, okay, well, the Clintons weren't on his side. The Obamas weren't on his side. They both stabbed him in the back. Chuck Schumer, you know, Nancy Pelosi. And I believe that. I believe that it was the Democratic Club decided that Joe Biden could be pushed out, so they would. So they said, Joe, the polls say you can't win. And it's like, okay, we're going by the polls. The polls said Hillary Clinton was going to win and Donald Trump had no shot. But let's ignore that because it's inconvenient. And basically they said Joe Biden got COVID. So, he was isolating in his home. And they said, it's Jover. You can resign with dignity now or you're going to lose and democracy is going to hate you and stuff. And it's funny because everybody's voted already in the Democratic primaries for the Democrat that they want, and they voted for Joe Biden. Now, that was rigged too because back then, if you wanted to run, it's like, oh, how dare you insult the party, of Joe Biden. And you'll see it now. If anybody else but Kamala Harris announces for the Democratic ticket, because the way it's set up now is that whoever the Democrats pick, and it can literally be anybody, whoever the Democrats pick can go on, be printed on every ballot and become president. So it's essentially like all the voting has been done, but the person who everybody voted for is no longer eligible. So the people representing those people have to vote again. And all the infrastructure is set up for the president and his vice president, so the vice president inherits that. But, like, who's she going to pick as her vice president? And, is anybody going to, challenge? And it's like that funny thing of, like, oh, are people going to wait? Gavin Newsom is going to wait. He's the California governor, who many people is like, he's well-spoken, he's this, he's that, he's smooth. He's going to run for president someday. And I said correctly that in 2028, Los Angeles is holding the Olympics. He is going to run on that as his record. The same way, Mitt Romney did that when they were in Salt Lake City. Which is funny because of, like, that's in Utah. And he was in Utah and now Massachusetts. And he's, like, flipped. It's kind of weird. But anyways. Joe Biden was forced out because he's not an Obama and he's not a Clinton, and they run the party, and they figured they can shove the old man out the door and pick and install who they want, and that person is Kamala Harris. And so the funny thing is that, like, anybody who decides to run against Kamala Harris, like, she can keep all the money her and Joe Biden raised together, and those are the rules. Anybody else who wants to accept donations has to come up with entire campaign infrastructure, state by state by state by state. They have to get 500 delegates to agree, and no more than 50 can be from one state. So it's like, if you're popular in Ohio, not more than 50 people can vote for you from Ohio. It, like, doesn't count. So you have to have popularity everywhere, which is pretty difficult when you don't have infrastructure and you haven't been campaigning. So the people who could challenge it, and they won't, but they could, would be Bernie Sanders, who ran against Hillary in 2016. They put the thumb on the scale and he lost. Ran against Joe Biden, but they were kind of too similar, and Biden had the backing of the party. Bernie didn't, and then Bernie, like, resigned and was like, oh, okay, it is what it is. And Bernie stepped down because he was, like, friends with Joe. Um, and, he also did a couple of things like praising Castro, which is just not a good move. I don't care how good his ideas are on paper and providing healthcare, which is bleeding Americans out now. That doesn't matter. It's just that's a stupid thing to do. And it was him ignoring his advisors and doing that and then losing kind of on his own accord. Um, and Tucker Carlson is because he doesn't know how to win or he doesn't like to win. He insists on losing, which is funny. You have to do and say uncomfortable things that you would never do if you want to win. And sometimes that involves not being yourself. And you know what? That's okay. It takes discipline. Not everybody can do it. But Bernie Sanders had a rough and tumble operation when he decided to run against Hillary Clinton. And he did a fantastic job. He almost tied her. And then, Democrats put their thumb on the scale and disrupted it. And, of course, nobody cared enough. But it was enough for Bernie Sanders to change the rules so that next time there'd be different rules. He ran against Joe Biden and lost. But now that Joe Biden is gone, if he ran, unless he was running against Pete Buttigieg, who hasn't made an announcement, neither has AOC, unless he made an announcement, the top two people who received the most votes aside from Joe Biden, who, he was backed by the blacks, and, Kamala Harris is circling the wagons and stuff like that right now and running up support. Most of the Democratic Party's votership is based on black appeal and stuff like that. That's what's important to them. So it's unlikely that Kamala will have a challenger because everybody's like, well, we need to beat Trump in November. But if somebody was calculating enough, and remember that, people were saying about George Bush Sr., just let him have another 4 years, we'll redraw this. And Bill Clinton was like, no, I'm going now. And Bill Clinton went in 1992, made George Herbert Walker Bush a 4-term president, stopped as a 4-term president, and then ran for 8 years. And that's the last time there was a political disruption, was with Bill Clinton, who was the third youngest president. The person who could do that now is Pete Buttigieg. Would really do it. It could be Bernie, which would just be funny because Bernie Sanders is older than Joe Biden. And this guy said to me, it's he's a fossil. I'm like, he was born a fossil, okay? If you look up Bernie Sanders young on YouTube and you look up Bernie Sanders young, his hair is just as messy and already thinning out. He has pretty much the same glasses. He has the same Brooklyn brogue. He has a Brooklyn accent, and he lives in Vermont, which is hilarious. And he's 82, and he sounds the exact same. He's always had the exact same principles, the exact same message, all of the time. You know where he stands on every single issue. So that's, funny to me. And then it's also funny when they're like, well, who is Kamala Harris? And then they just mention her resume. It's well, that's her resume. That's not who she is as a person. But we know who Bernie Sanders is as a person. The problem is that the elites don't like him, and he wouldn't be able to get past them because they would never vote for him. He could if he ran against the people, and this was done in November, but this was in January, but this was done in a very calculable way where somebody higher up at the Democrats clearly thought, let's wait for Joe Biden to run in the primary. He's losing a bit of his marbles, but we'll let him run. Then they convince him, it's you can deliver a knockout punch, Joe. Just do a debate with him in June. And they ask for the debates, and he does the debate and does terribly because he doesn't realize he's on camera and he has his mouth gaping open and he seems just totally out of it the whole, just having an hour and a half conversation with an old man. And people are oh my God, this is terrible. But, people who have been politically paying attention are yeah, this is Joe Biden. He's been this dumbfounded the entire time. He's a regular 82-year-old man. Not shocking here. And then John King of CNN gets it in his ear. He's like, I'm hearing top level panic in the Democratic primary of like, this is a serious problem. We need to replace this guy. And me and my mom are like, what? Like, CNN is like doing the work of the Republicans for them, saying Joe Biden needs to be replaced. And then Damon Lindelof, who wrote Lost and a bunch of other unsatisfying scripts, and Watchmen, which is okay, um, and The Leftovers, which is great. But he's known for like not knowing how his own projects end, is suggesting, hey, let's get rid of Joe Biden. And then George Clooney is like, great idea. And then a bunch of other donors are like, great idea. And then Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are like, great idea. And like the Democrats are basically turning their back on Joe Biden, who's had, again, the best in 4 years, the best record of any president in modern history, because he actually got something done, which was he passed the CHIPS Act, which allowed semiconductors to be built and brought back lots of manufacturing jobs, like more than any other president, which is difficult to do in this century, being, smart and developing with China and stuff like that. He basically, like, brought back a whole lot of manufacturing jobs. And then he paid for an infrastructure bill, which he was able to get passed at, like, an incredible amount of, like, doing deals and stuff like that to give $10 billion to repair the roads in America, which are just like completely dilapidated, and like build back better plan, they called it. And then he tried to forgive student debt, but of course Joe Manchin effed that up because he's an a-hole. He wanted to be like, I'm going out, I want this to happen. One thing that he could do, because he's still around and he's still president until January, is going to be like, okay, well, I'll back this only under the condition of this, you know? And that'd be nice. Can you imagine if on his way out, Joe Biden is like, I'm going to cancel student debt for real this time and stuff? Because it missed by a single vote, basically, and that was Joe Manchin. Yeah. So, anyways, that is our show for now, because we're waiting to see who Kamala Harris will pick as a vice president. Do I think that she can win? Yes. Do I think the Democrats are capable of winning under her? Iffy. But I think that it doesn't matter, because Donald Trump will lose himself. He'll be sentenced in September for the 34 felony counts that he committed. I don't think the judge is going to be nice with him. He deserves a harsh punishment. And then if that doesn't work, then he's going to be, there's going to be another trial in November as people are voting. I just don't think that the majority of Americans are going to vote for a convicted felon. And you might see the likes of which we have never seen before, an entire wipeout. Like, all Kamala has to do is prove that she's competent, which she should be able to do. And you'll hear the negatives about her of, like, she has no personality. Where's she been these last few years? She's done nothing, which, by the way, the vice president essentially does nothing but wait on the president. Like, they do nothing. They have no official acts or responsibilities. They're just there as a backup. So, keep people's heads cool. But the one thing you'll hear about Kamala Harris is that as California Attorney General, she kept men in prison long after their sentencing was up to get free labor, which Tulsi Gabbard correctly pointed out to her, which ended her presidential campaign when she was seeking the nomination against Joe Biden. And then Joe Biden's like, well, my Democratic support is with black women. I'm going to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court, but I also need, like, a black female running mate. And, like, Kamala Harris was, like, the only one that they could do, because he could get Stacey Abrams, but they need her in Georgia so that they can win. And she, like, performed a miracle there, because, like, Georgia is, like, a southern state, a red state, and they put out, like, a hell of a fight there. So, that was one of the states Donald Trump wanted overturned, and that's why he's, facing, crimes there for trying to, like, rig the election, for all his talk about rigging. So, Yeah, that's where we're at in American politics. I suspect when we talk next, we'll probably have a better idea of who the vice president on Kamala Harris's ticket is going to be and who she will um, pick to debate against JD Vance. They say that like Pete Buttigieg is not useful because as being from Indiana, that's not enough of a swing state, I guess. But if we look at who won in 2020, let me just pick here. 2020 U.S. presidential election. Okay, why did... I hate it when it's like something and then something else pops in the search bar. But if we look at the results map, state by state analysis. Yeah, I don't... Okay, is it gonna show? Yeah, I don't care. Don't care. Don't care. Show me the states, and I don't mean Missouri, which is called the Show Me State. I really don't know. 2020 U.S. presidential election. It's gonna make me friggin' figure out where the frig Indiana is on a map. It sucks. I don't care about county results. Maybe if I hit show all. Is this just... Oh, in Arizona, it made me double click. That sucks. I don't give a crap about Arizona. Oh, now I went too far back. That's how it goes. Okay, let me look at the thing. Oh, it's... So it's like zoomed in really small, so I can't tell. Utah. Nevada. Idaho. That's gotta be... Nope, that's Wyoming. It's Oregon. Washington. I gotta find out where the frig Indiana is. It's gotta be in the middle, right? It's Kansas. That's Nebraska. South Dakota. Utah. Colorado. New Mexico. Arizona. Where the frig is Indiana? I thought it was in the Midwest. Okay. Let me see here. Yeah, Indiana, U.S. state. Where? Oh, it's in the top right. Way off. See, I can't get that. Ohio. That's West Virginia. Kentucky. I was just looking at it. Why is this so hard to find, eh? Yeah, Indiana, that's red. Yeah, so it's the same thing of like with Joe Biden picking his VP. It's like I have to pick somebody to balance the ticket. I said I would pick a black woman. There are 3 black women, one you've never heard of, one who did terribly but like fits the bill and is a competent person, and then the third who's gonna save my ass in the election, but we need them in their place. The classic, you do your job too well, so we can't promote you kind of thing. So, and then people are like, well, what about Gretchen Whitmer? And it's like, I'm totally fine with like a 2-woman ticket, but, if people were randomly plotting to kidnap a governor and the FBI had to stop it, I don't think that person is like popular enough to win a general vote. So just pick the Reddit guy who's like super well spoken and young, and then you can have him debate JD Vance, And this guy leapfrogged from being a mayor to being a major candidate in the United States without any money previously to being Secretary of Transportation. Like, he went from, like, the legend of Pete Buttigieg, because he was, like, Reddit loved him, even though I don't trust him because he's that kind of, like, shady white guy who's kind of like, he's dangerously smart. This guy worked at McKinsey, and one of their clients that they consulted for was Loblaws during Loblaws' price-fixing scandal. So he theoretically went and, consulted on, hey, by the way, we're price-fixing bread and stuff. Here's how you do it. Now, he says he had, like, worked 6 months on them, and he was responsible for that account, but like it's just part of the thing of like this guy went to Harvard, went to Oxford. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He is super smart, super incredibly well spoken. He was he was a lieutenant in the United States Navy. He fought in Afghanistan, whereas JD Vance fought in Iraq, which is like perfect. He got a Joint Service Commendation Medal. So it's like he matches JD Vance in that way. Like, and he went from being mayor of South Bend, Indiana, um, to the United States Secretary of Transportation. Whereas, somebody like Ben Carson went from, you know, basically being a surgeon at Johns Hopkins who, like, successfully separated twins to, like, housing and urban development secretary. But that's like, you could say a lateral move. Um, but Pete Buttigieg was like, it's funny, mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and Indiana, or South Bend rather, the population of South Bend is less than that of Kingston. It's 103,000 people. So that's like going from the mayor of Kingston to being the deputy prime minister, which I guess like it's an even bigger thing than that because it's like 10 times bigger. It's like essentially going from local mayor to prime minister of Canada. You know, Justin Trudeau, meanwhile, like he was an MP before he got elected. Like there's nobody who wasn't an MP who got elected because we work in a different system. But this guy is dangerously lip smart. Um, if I wanted to win, I'd want him on my team, but stay tuned for the next episode to find out in American politics and movies to see where things go. Take care then.